Well, good morning. My name's Don Perata, and I am the President Pro Tem of the California State Senate. And we are here this morning using the ConocoPhillips refinery as a backdrop for a specific purpose, and that is to try to explain what's going on with the budget stalemate in Sacramento, why I believe the Republicans in the Senate are holding up the budget now in its 40th or 41st day late. The sticking point in the budget right now has nothing to do with the budget itself. The Republicans seem to have generally accepted the governor's promise to use his blue pencil to cut down to an amount that the Republicans wanted. So the remaining issue is something that has nothing to do with the budget, but has everything to do with the state of California. Republicans would like CEQA, California's Environmental Quality Act, which is the landmark legislation in the country. It is what was signed by Governor Reagan 40 years ago, and its intended purpose was to protect Californians from unintended consequences of growth and development. It was not to stop it, but to say if there are going to be some problems, how could you mitigate those problems? Now, frankly, you wouldn't have most of these developments around this community along 80 at all had it not been for CEQA, because you had to have certain conditions that had to be met by the developers, by the builders, in order to protect those moving in. Well, what the Republicans want right now is to have CEQA suspended for 3 or 4 years, suspended. And the reason is behind me. ConocoPhillips is undergoing a major expansion. I think their capacity is going to increase by 1/3. No one's arguing that that should not happen. What ConocoPhillips has been asking for, however, through the Republicans, and they are now holding up the state budget until they get it, they want to be exempted from CEQA and air emission issues while they complete the reconstruction or expansion of this refinery. Now, we've all been talking about global warming, greenhouse gases. Governor Schwarzenegger has gone international with California's aggressive proposals to manage and roll back emissions that are creating greenhouse gases. Republicans now have chosen instead to hold up the budget, to get, by holding up the budget, something they could never get in any other way. So what I have said unequivocally, you hear Republicans say, we're here to negotiate, Perata's not negotiating. Well, Don Perata is not going to negotiate away CEQA. We are not going to bargain away California's environmental protection, particularly with a gun to our heads. Now, this is a minority within a minority that is asking for something that is wrong, unacceptable, and should not happen. If this was a real issue, it should have been brought up during the budget. 8 months of activity, meetings, hundreds and hundreds of subcommittee meetings, and Republicans sit on those committees. It never once came up. This issue did not come up until the middle of July, July 20th, this issue came up. When the Assembly passed the budget and sent it over to the Senate, this issue arose as what's known in my business as a drop-dead issue. You either do it or nothing else is going to happen. And that's where we're stuck. And it's important that people understand that this is not about anything that would be associated with the budget. But very innocent people are really being hurt now. People who are in nursing homes, in hospitals, daycare centers, none of them are being paid. None of them are being paid. And they're not being paid because one of the biggest refineries in the world, or refiners in the world, was in the Capitol, their lobbyists aggressively and actively crafting language. The other villain here was the California Building Industry Association. The lobbyists for this association, they represent multi-state builders, people who build in Texas and in California and everywhere else. They wanted the same thing. they wanted protection over the next, exemption over the next 3 or 4 years. So the issue is the environment of California. The position of the state Senate is we are not going to negotiate or bargain away California's environment. We are not going to be held hostage. You're not going to blackmail us. And in the final analysis, if anybody thought this through for 10 seconds in the Republican caucus, they would conclude that if by some miracle we were to accede, and then the Assembly were to accede and put this bill on the governor's desk, how would Arnold Schwarzenegger, who has been on the cover of national magazines, holding the world in his hands, how would he ever sign a bill that would eviscerate CEQA? To eviscerate a law signed by the godfather of the Republican Party, Ronald Reagan. So this is mind-numbing in its short-sightedness. And I ask and the reason that we're doing this publicly is not that I think I'm going to pressure Southern California Republican voters from Northern California, but because I want everyone to know what's really at stake here and why there will never be any capitulation. Now, I have with me today some of the stalwarts of the environmental movement. They have forgotten more than people like I know about the issue. But it's important, I think, to understand from their perspective why this is so important and why it's just not a matter of partisanship, it's a matter of principle. Who wants to go first, Annie?
Good morning. My name's Ann Nothoff, and I'm the California Advocacy Director for NRDC, the Natural Resources Defense Council. My last name is Notthoff. I was told by the senator. I wanted to say thank you to Senator Perata for standing up for California's environment. And I want to say that he's doing the work that he's doing on behalf of the people of California. The 14 Senate Democrats who are asking to weaken California's environmental laws couldn't be more out of step with the California public if they tried. Did I say Democrat? Yeah. Okay.
We have enough trouble.
All right. Let me say that again. The 14 Senate Republicans who are holding up the budget in an attempt to weaken California's environmental laws couldn't be more out of step with the California public if they tried. Just 15 days ago, the Public Policy Institute of California, which is one of the state's most respected research institutions, released a poll that found that an overwhelming majority of Californians want the state to do more to protect the environment, not less. And 81% of Californians want the state to act right away to combat global warming, and that includes 60% of Republicans and 80% of independents. So it's a very widely held view in California that we've got to do something now to protect the environment and to combat global warming. They want action faster, not slower. And what the Senate Republicans are trying to do is slow things down. Let's wait for a couple of years and see what we should do about that then. So they're completely out of step with the California public, and I think that they are right. The Senate Republicans are taking a page out of Newt Gingrich's failed playbook. In Washington, they tried to shut down the government for policy arguments unrelated to the budget, and that didn't work in Washington, and it shouldn't work in Sacramento. Thanks.
Good morning. My name's Rico Mastrodonato. I'm the Northern California Director for the California League of Conservation Voters. My last name is spelled Mastrodonato. California League of Conservation Voters is a grassroots organization. We actually represent over 35,000 Californians across the state. Our organization talks one-on-one to hundreds of Californians every single day, and the overwhelming feedback we get from them is that we care about our environment, we care about our future, we care about our children's future. We don't want that to be mortgaged by Senate Republicans. The Senate Republicans are not listening. They want to gut the California Environmental Quality Act, our environmental Bill of Rights, if they are to pass this budget. That's not acceptable to Californians. Let me share a few of the statistics that Annie just mentioned. The Public Policy Institute of California, 81%, that's an overwhelming majority. 82% think global warming is a serious threat to our economy and our quality of life. Gutting the California Environmental Quality Act to pass this budget, what the Senate Republicans intend to do is a slap in the face to Californians. We need to pass a budget that keeps environmental standards high and keeps the California Environmental Quality Act intact. We ask the Senate Republicans to listen to their constituents, represent California values, and pass this budget now.
Morning. My name's Dan Kalb. I'm the California Policy Director for the Union of Concerned Scientists. Last name is spelled K-A-L-B, as in boy. First, I want to thank Senator Perata and concur with everything that's already been said today, expressing our bewilderment and displeasure at the holding up of the budget for the apparent reason to gut and put on hold one of the most important environmental laws in the state, if not the country. What California Environmental Quality Act does in many respects is shed light on the environmental impacts, especially in recent years, of course, we've been all very concerned about the impacts to our climate and the causes of global warming. And that law can actually shed light on new things happening in the state that will add to global warming pollution and impact global warming and cause tremendous harm not only to the citizens of California, but to everybody across the entire planet. So we need to use that law, and we need to make sure that the law is not held as hostage, is not put aside, is not put in the closet for 4 years. That law is a very important law, and it sheds light on information, on scientific information, on environmental information, on all sorts of information that needs to be used to curb the potential impacts that new projects, that various things that go on in the state can have on our climate and our environment. So we need to not stick our heads in the closet and be in the dark. Apparently, some of the members of the Senate and the Republican caucus want to keep us in the dark in terms of the information that we need to know to curb global warming pollution. We need to shed light on that information by ensuring that the Environmental Quality Act of California stays in place and is enforced. We could shed light and know what we need to do to correct the problems that we have in the state in terms of global warming emissions. And if we don't do that, we won't know what to do. In other words, cities and counties, local project developers, cities and counties, the state of California won't have the tools, won't have the scientific information to reduce global warming pollution, to what we call mitigate the impacts of these large projects, if we don't use that act to shed light on what we need to do. So we asked the Senate Republicans to listen to their voters across the state, as you just heard, and not hold the budget hostage, and to let the budget go forward as it's been negotiated, and to keep the Environmental Quality Act in place as the citizens of California want. Thank you.
Now, let me just conclude by offering a couple of real-life situations. First of all, in the two dirtiest counties in air quality in the country are San Bernardino and Riverside, represented by 3 Republican senators. Every time I come back to my district and stop for a cup of coffee or go into the store or wherever I am confronted with someone whose child no longer has daycare because they can't afford to pay. So we have working families that can no longer provide for their children in daycare because of the budget's not being passed. Elderly people in nursing homes that are not going to be getting the care that they need because they're not going to get paid because the state will not reimburse the owner of the nursing home. As school starts this month, about a third of the money going to K through 12 and all the money going to community colleges will be withheld. So the holdup and the holdout and the hostage that the Republicans in the Senate have taken is affecting the lives of millions of Californians up and down the state. And it's being done for no purpose. Any issue that is legitimate, that needs to be addressed, has been addressed. In the last 2 years, during what the governor calls the post-partisanship, which seems to be on a severe decline today, for 2 years we worked together and we passed major legislation, a $43 billion Rebuild California investment. We have worked together. And for a group of individuals now who, again, are 14 out of the 120 legislators in Sacramento, to hold up the state budget, to make it 40 days late, is unconscionable. And we could all talk about retribution, and that's not the point. The point is, have the Republicans understand that this is not, they have a good budget. They got a very good budget. This is never going to be in my highlight reel. I voted for it because it was the best opportunity available at the time. But it is a Republican budget. They should be proud of what they've accomplished, declare victory, and go home. Questions?
Is this just ConocoPhillips? I mean, do they have that much clout, or are there other refineries or other companies?
No, actually what happened was, and the only reason I've mentioned them is because their lobbyist was in the one of the offices of one of the holdouts working on legislation. I don't know that it affects any other one. The reason that we're here is because I know it affected them. The Building Industry Association that represents not the mom and pop builders, the venture builders, but the major multi-state developers were in the same office. So, I mean, there are fingerprints of special interests and the business lobby all over this. And it's just it's a real shame, because I think a lot of Republicans now would probably like to relive that moment and change it. But, you know, once you get yourself dug in, you have a hard time digging out unless you stop digging. And they're still digging. So this is not you know, high rhetoric. These are the facts. And I guess if we had to ever prove this, I could probably have people come in. And I talked to one of the lobbyists for the BIA. And when I found out this was going on, and I said, this is not the way to do it. If it needs to get done, we can do it. But don't hold the budget hostage. Left my office, went right to another office, and here we are today. So this is not speculation. And if you lived right over here, wouldn't you want to have the Environmental Quality Act protecting you as they add capacity to that refinery? Of course you would.
I would just add that the same special interests that tried to block California's landmark global warming bill last year are the same special interests that are trying to get their way in the budget right now.
And the same 14 never voted for that AB 32 either, so there's a pattern here. The black helicopters will soon be in.
Senator, you have said that this is not, that the environmental portion of this debate shouldn't be part of the budget. The governor said the same thing. But how do you respond to Republican Senator Runner, who says that some of the projects that are included in the budget, some of the infrastructure projects, might be affected by this? Therefore, it is a budget issue.
Well, first of all, Mr. Runner was never part of any of these discussions until he started having press conferences, number one. Secondly, early on, I offered that, because this issue was brought to me by the California Transportation Commission, and I said we will write legislation that would give safe harbor to any project that is being built as a consequence or as a result of the bonds that we passed. It was fair to me to say until we have regulations, we should not hold projects accountable to a standard that doesn't exist. That's just reasonable. That was rejected. Tomorrow morning, that same legislation that we wrote could be acted upon and put into law, and we would achieve the same result. So if Mr. Runner's assertion was the one quoted, then we have an answer to that can be dealt with away from the budget. What's really going on here is that they want to have a complete suspension of California's Environmental Act for 4 years. So it's a little bait and switch. And I've told them privately and publicly, and I'll say again right now, if what we're trying to do is to protect the investments of voters given to us last year until such time as we have the air quality standards established, there's a solution to that. If you're trying to wholesale destroy a 40-year-old environmental act will be no part of it.
Are you saying you are willing to suspend CEQA for?
No, it wouldn't be. No, it's not a suspension at all. Here, this gets to be very complicated. But there is a solution to the problem that the Republicans say. It is a solution that should be dealt with in a policy committee, not in the budget. And so while the problem that they say is, let's take the Caldecott Tunnel. That's they're still, I guess they're in the design phase right now. They wouldn't want a project like that delayed because of air quality standards as a consequence of AB 32 that have not yet been written. That's very reasonable. It ain't a threat. It's a, as the governor would say, it's a bogus issue. It's being used as a dog on the track or rabbit on the track to allow big projects like this to get built that have nothing to do with what they're saying is why they're holding out. So, for the average person, all you need to know is that why we don't have a state budget is because 14 Republican senators in California have decided that they want to get through the budget something that they couldn't get any other way. And what Annie mentioned is true. The alignment is the same people who opposed the governor's AB 32 proposal. And so this is not very mysterious. I realize that one politician, Perata, talking about Runner and Runner talking about Perata is who cares. But there are some people. That's why I brought some people who actually know a little something about the subject matter.
Speaker Nunes has said if this goes back to the Assembly, if nothing is done before they get back on the 20th, essentially things get worse for Republicans because they'll go back on a lot of the deals that they made before. What is your response to that? Do you think that would be an effective tool?
Well, when I've asked, there's no reason why the Assembly should have to do anything further with the budget. There's a little in-house rivalry always. They did their job, and then they left. And we've done that in the Senate before ourselves. So they have really done their job. I believe that if we were forced to go back into negotiations, which is not going to happen, this thing would deteriorate. We'd be talking here with parkas on around Christmas time. I mean, it's just not going to happen. So, we're all trying to figure out a magic potion that we can mix up and give someone to drink that will make it okay. But the simple fact of the matter is the governor said he will cut $700 million more out of this budget, which is what the Senate Republicans demanded. And now they're saying they want something else. So if you've got the Republican governor, you've got the Republicans and Democrats in the Assembly all saying the same thing, you've got me saying the same thing, and what you have are 14 and one Republican in the Senate, then, there's something wrong here. It's like one picture's crooked, so then we're going to make everything else crooked to conform with the single one. It doesn't make any sense at all.
Senator, so say I'm average Joe California and I have a state job, or maybe I rely on state-funded daycare. What's next? Tell them in layman's terms. What's next? Maybe they don't understand all this.
There will be if you have a child in state-supported child care, the chances that child care will be terminated are grow every single day. Child care centers will not have state money to keep their doors open. Their workers will go somewhere else to find a job. You as a parent will not be able to leave your child and go work because there'll be nobody there to take care of them. If you have a parent or a loved one or anyone in a nursing home, there would be a good chance in the days ahead that you may have to reclaim that parent and bring them home or put them somewhere else because that nursing home will not pay its workers, and those workers will have to seek employment elsewhere. It's not as though everybody can go out and get a line of credit and start living off of that until this thing comes into play. Most Californians, I'm sure, live paycheck to paycheck. They have budgeted each month. So that's what's being affected here. A lot of teachers going back to the classroom right now will do so understanding, and believe me, they understand that they're not going to, their paychecks will be in jeopardy beginning the 1st of September. So as each day goes by, more and more people are affected. It affects everyone, not simply state or government workers. It affects everybody. And that's really the consequence of this action. They are going to shut down government. Republicans are going to shut down state government the same way as the Republicans under Newt Gingrich tried to shut down Washington in the 90s. And I think it's going to have the same consequence. But in the meanwhile, lots of people are going to be pained. I don't care if we get any more Democrats elected next year. My issue is now. Let's make sure that the people that we're sent, we have one job in Sacramento to do, one job, and that is to pass the budget. So I've told everybody, anybody that's got legislation that they're supporting or sponsoring or authoring, we will not take up another bill in the state Senate until the budget's passed. I mean, if we can't do this, we can't do anything else.
Probably like to get 2 more Democrats elected. So has this then become a game of chicken now? Who backs down first, or when do we get?
No, we shouldn't. We are the majority party. I don't think it's any mistake why 14 Republicans are holding out and they're not the majority. So this is not a question of test of wills. We are the majority party. And under California's weird constitution, we have to have 2/3 to vote for a budget. So this is the Republicans' time on center stage. They got a huge number of victories that they could put in their scrapbook and show their grandchildren. They could go to any stadium in their district and take a victory lap and do it proudly and saying, I got a Republican budget with a huge reserve and no deficit. They could do all that. So this isn't a test of wills. They won. I'll be happy to say they've won. Now, would you give us what we need in return so that we can get on with our lives? I mean, I'm not crowing about this budget. You'll never help me. I'll never walk around in my district and say, hey, we got a great budget here. It's embarrassing, but it's the best we could do. The Republicans won. They ought to have enough sense to declare victory. Okay, thank you very much. Good to see you all.